I never thought I would find myself standing in my own kitchen staring at the children I had helped raise, only to hear them say words that cut deeper than any knife. "You're not our real mom. You don't make the rules. We only answer to our biological parents." My name is Hannah. I'm 40 years old, and for the last 3 years I've truly tried to be the kind of stepmother every child deserves. I thought that love, patience, and kindness could win over even the most guarded heart. I believed if I cooked their favorite meals, drove them to practice, remembered their birthdays, and treated them like my own, eventually they would see me as family. But the truth is harsher than fairy tales. No matter how much love you pour into someone, sometimes all they see is the absence of blood. When I married Mark, I brought 2 children into the marriage, my little ones Emma and Tyler, who were just 10 and 8 at the time. Mark brought his teenagers Mason and Chloe, 16 and 14. I knew blending families wasn't easy, but I thought if I showed consistency, fairness, and warmth over time, we could build something whole. For months I convinced myself every cold shoulder was just teenage moodiness. Every defiant glance was just growing pains. When Mason refused to help me carry in groceries, muttering that I wasn't his mom, I swallowed the sting and told myself he just needed time. When Chloe rolled her eyes and said she'd wait for her real mom to tell her to clean up, I bit my lip and chose silence over confrontation. But silence builds walls. And every time I chose it, I felt myself disappearing inside the very house I was trying so hard to hold together. It wasn't just about me. My children started to notice. Emma came to me crying one afternoon because Mason had taken her art supplies and snapped at her when she asked for them back. "Your mom doesn't make the rules here. Only real parents do." Real parents. Tyler, barely 8 years old, asked me why some kids in our house listened to me and others didn't. How could I explain DNA and loyalty wars to a child who just wanted fairness? I spoke to Mark about it again and again. He told me the same thing each time: they're adjusting. Their father fills their heads with ideas about loyalty. Just give them more time. But time didn't soften the edges, it sharpened them. The more I tried, the bolder their rejection grew, as though they had learned I was powerless to stop it. The breaking point came on an ordinary Thursday evening in February. I walked into the house after a long day of work, exhausted and aching, only to hear Tyler's muffled sobs from his room. His little hands clutched the broken pieces of a model airplane he and I had built together one rainy weekend. Mason smashed it against the wall, he whispered between tears. And when I cried, he said, "That's all your mom is good for anyway, buying you new things." Something inside me broke with that toy. I found Mason sprawled in the living room playing video games, his face lit by the flicker of the screen, as if nothing had happened. When I confronted him, he didn't flinch. "Accidents happen," he shrugged. When I pressed him, his words cut like glass. "You're not my mom. I don't owe you an explanation. You don't make the rules. I don't answer to you." In that moment I felt an eerie calm settle over me, the kind of clarity that comes not from rage, but from a truth you can no longer deny. They didn't see me as a parent. They didn't see me at all. That night I sat alone in the dim glow of the kitchen light, a list forming in my mind with every beat of my heart. Everything in this house that kept it running, every bill, every phone, every privilege was in my name. If Mason and Chloe believed I was not their parent, then perhaps it was time I stopped carrying the weight of providing for them as if I were. And for the first time in years, I felt something stir inside me that I had long buried resolve. That night, as the house slept, I sat at the dining table with a pad of paper in front of me. The same table where we had shared birthdays, homework nights, and awkward family dinners was now where I began to draft a new plan, not out of vengeance, but out of survival. I wrote down every bill, every account, every responsibility that kept this family afloat. The mortgage was in my name. The utilities my name. The internet, the cell phones, the groceries, all mine. I realized that for years I had carried the weight of children who refused to see me, even as they enjoyed every comfort my effort provided. I didn't sleep. Instead, I replayed Mason's smirk in my mind. Chloe's dismissive tone, the way they tossed my sacrifices aside as if they were scraps. And for the first time, I didn't just feel hurt. I felt foolish for believing that love alone would earn me respect. Respect, I finally understood, is not given freely. It must be taught, demanded sometimes, even wrestled out of those who take it for granted. The next morning, I went about my routine as if nothing had changed. I made breakfast for Emma and Tyler, kissed the tops of their heads, and sent them off to school. But when it came to Mason and Chloe, I didn't call them down. I didn't set plates for them. When Chloe came into the kitchen and asked where her avocado toast was, I simply said, "Ask your biological mom." She blinked at me, her lips parting in shock before storming off. Mason followed soon after, demanding why the Wi-Fi wasn't working. I looked him in the eye and said calmly, "Because your biological parents don't pay for it. Ask them to fix it." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. Over the next few days, I let the changes ripple through the house. Their phones stopped working when I canceled the family plan, leaving only Emma's and Tyler's connected. The streaming account suddenly required payments Mason and Chloe weren't willing to make. The fridge no longer carried the snacks they liked, only the ones I knew Emma and Tyler enjoyed. When Mark noticed, his face tightened. "Hannah, what are you doing? This isn't the way." I turned to him, my voice low but steady. "For 3 years I've been their parent in every way that mattered. And for 3 years they've told me I'm nothing to them. I'm done funding my own humiliation. If I'm not their mom, then I won't play mom. Let their real parents pick up the slack." Mark rubbed his temples, caught between loyalty and truth. "They're just kids," he muttered. "No," I said, my eyes stinging. "They're young adults who need to learn that words have consequences. If they only answer to their biological parents, then let them live by that." The days that followed were a storm. Mason raged, slamming doors, shouting that I was cruel. Chloe cried, insisting I was tearing the family apart. But with every protest, I stood firm. "I'm not punishing you," I told them evenly. "I'm simply respecting your choice. You told me I'm not your mom. I'm just living by the rules you set." Behind closed doors, Emma and Tyler watched everything unfold with wide eyes. One night, Emma crept into my room, her small hands clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Mom," she whispered, "will Mason and Chloe still hate you?" My heart cracked, but I hugged her tight. "Maybe for a while," I admitted. "But sometimes people need to lose comfort to understand value. What matters is that you and Tyler know I'll never stop being your mom." The shift in our house was seismic. Slowly, Mason and Chloe began to feel the weight of their words. Without Wi-Fi, Mason's grades slipped. Without rides to practice, Chloe missed games. Their biological mother, who lived 2 states away, wasn't around to swoop in and rescue them. And Mark, caught in the middle, could no longer pretend this was just teenage adjustment. Reality had finally set in. But I wasn't done yet. One evening, I gathered all 4 kids in the living room. My hands trembled as I held the photo of our wedding day, all of us smiling, full of hope. "I want you all to look at this picture," I said. I wanted so badly for us to be a family. I poured everything into that dream. But family isn't about blood. It's about respect, effort, and love returned. If you can't see me as a mother, then at least see me as the person who's kept this house standing. From this day forward, the rules are simple. If you want the privileges of this home, you contribute to it. If you want to ignore me, you live with the weight of that choice. Their faces were a storm of emotions: defiance, confusion, guilt. And for the first time, I didn't beg them to understand. I simply laid the truth bare and walked away. That night, as I washed the dishes, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. My eyes were tired, but behind the exhaustion was a spark I hadn't seen in years, the spark of someone who had finally chosen herself. Mason lasted exactly 3 days before the cracks started to show. The boy who once mocked me for asking him to help with groceries now lingered near the fridge, scowling at the empty shelves where his favorite snacks used to sit. He didn't dare ask me to buy them. Instead, he muttered under his breath, "This house sucks," and stomped upstairs. Chloe tried to hold out longer, begging Mark to convince me to relent. But Mark, weary of the tension, finally said, "Your stepmom has done more for you than you realize. Maybe it's time you stop treating her like the enemy." That night, I lay awake replaying his words. Mark had never defended me so openly before. Perhaps even he had finally seen the truth, that I wasn't the villain but the only one keeping this family afloat. By the end of the week, Mason's phone lay dead on the counter, a silent brick without service. Chloe's best friend showed up at the door asking why she hadn't replied to any messages. Chloe flushed embarrassed and snapped, "Our Wi-Fi's down." Her friend raised an eyebrow. "Can't you just ask your parents to fix it?" The word lingered in the air, parents. Chloe's eyes darted to me, but I said nothing. Sometimes silence is sharper than any lecture. The following weekend, Mark suggested we all sit down for a family meeting. Mason rolled his eyes. Chloe crossed her arms. Emma and Tyler curled beside me like shadows. I kept my voice calm. "This isn't about punishing anyone," I began. "This is about respect. You can't tell me I'm not your mother, but expect me to mother you in every way that suits you. If I'm nothing to you, then you need to start living like that means something." Mason scoffed. "You think you can just cut us off? Dad won't let you." Mark leaned forward, his tone firmer than I had ever heard. "She can. And she has every right to. Your mom and I agreed she would manage the house, and she's been doing it alone for years. You don't get to spit on her and then enjoy everything she provides." The room went still. Chloe's lip trembled. Mason's face hardened, but they had no comeback. For once, their rebellion had met a wall they couldn't break. The days that followed weren't easy. There were slammed doors, whispered insults, even tears. But slowly, so slowly, I almost missed it, their behavior began to shift. Mason offered to take out the trash without me asking. Chloe asked if she could help Emma with her homework. Small steps, fragile as glass, but steps nonetheless. One evening I came home to find Mason sitting at the table, his math book open, his face tight with frustration. "The Wi-Fi's still down," he muttered. Can I use your hotspot?" I hesitated, then handed him my phone. His shoulders relaxed, and for the first time in years he whispered, "Thanks." It was a single word, but it felt like a seed planted in barren soil. Chloe's change came more quietly. She started lingering in the kitchen while I cooked, asking questions about recipes, pretending she didn't care. One night she blurted, "I know I was mean. I just didn't want to feel like I was betraying my mom." My hands stilled over the cutting board. I turned to her gently. "Loving me doesn't mean betraying her. It means your heart is big enough for both." She didn't answer, but her eyes glistened as she stirred the pot beside me. Still, I didn't let my guard down. I knew wounds this deep don't heal overnight. Respect is built brick by brick, and one slip could topple the wall. But for the first time, I felt the foundation shifting. One Friday evening, Emma and Tyler were sprawled on the couch watching cartoons when Mason walked in, phone in hand. "Dad," he said reluctantly, "I called Mom. She said she can't cover our bills. She told us to just listen to Hannah." His voice cracked on my name, as if saying it in that way cost him something. Mark nodded, glancing at me. "Then maybe it's time you both start appreciating what she's done." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Mason sat down beside Emma, watching cartoons with her, the tension in his shoulders easing. Chloe curled up in the armchair, silent but present. For the first time in months, the house felt less like a battlefield and more like a home in repair. Later that night, I stood by the window, the moonlight spilling across the floor. My reflection looked older, wearier, but stronger too. I thought of all the times I'd cried in silence, wondering if I'd ever be enough. Now I realized it wasn't about being enough, it was about demanding the respect I had earned. The journey wasn't over. There would still be arguments, still be tears, but something had shifted. And for the first time, I believed this family might finally see me not as a stepmother, not as a placeholder, but as the woman who held it all together. The shift in the house wasn't a miracle, it was fragile, like glass balancing on the edge of a table. Every step forward felt uncertain, every small kindness shadowed by the memory of words that had cut so deep. But still, something had undeniably changed. Mason no longer barked, "You're not my mom," whenever I asked for help. Chloe, though still cautious, didn't roll her eyes every time I entered the room. One Saturday morning, I woke up to the smell of pancakes. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. When I walked into the kitchen, I found Chloe standing at the stove, hair messy, flipping pancakes with an awkward concentration. She noticed me, cheeks flushing. "I thought Emma and Tyler might want breakfast," she mumbled. I remembered you usually cook Saturday mornings.
I swallowed the lump in my throat.
It wasn't about the pancakes. It was about effort, about acknowledgement. They'll love that, I said softly, resisting the urge to wrap her in the hug I'd wanted to give her for years. Later that day, Mason hovered near me as I folded laundry. He shifted from foot to foot, his usual bravado gone. "Look, about the plane," he muttered. For a moment I didn't understand, and then I remembered the model airplane he'd smashed in a fit of cruelty, the one Tyler had cried over. Mason's voice cracked. "I shouldn't have done that. I was mad, but it wasn't fair." I studied him carefully. Apologies from Mason were as rare as eclipses. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "Maybe you could tell Tyler too." He grimaced, but then nodded as if agreeing with himself more than me. Mark noticed the changes too. One evening he squeezed my hand under the dinner table, a silent thank you that needed no words. For the first time since our wedding, I felt like a true partner, not a background caretaker. He had watched me hold the line, and maybe he finally understood how much strength it had taken. But rebuilding respect is never simple. A week later, Mason had another outburst, angry over a curfew I had set, slamming doors and shouting that I was ruining his life. The old me would have cried in the bathroom afterward, questioning whether I was cut out for this role. But now I stayed firm. I told him calmly, "If you don't like my rules, you can live by your biological parents instead. But in this house, this is how it works." He glared at me, fists clenched, but he didn't say the words he once threw so easily. "You're not my mom." He bit them back, maybe realizing they no longer carried power. Chloe, meanwhile, began to show her change in smaller ways. She started asking me questions about schoolwork, hovering nearby, as though waiting for permission to connect. One evening, while Emma and Tyler were already asleep, she sat at the counter while I washed dishes. Her voice was quiet, almost trembling. "Sometimes I feel like I'm betraying my mom if I let you get close." I set down the sponge and looked at her. "Loving me doesn't mean loving her less," I said gently. "It just means your heart has room for both." Her eyes glistened, and though she didn't reply, she didn't leave either. That silence was a beginning. It wasn't lost on me that Emma and Tyler thrived as the storm calmed. They laughed more freely, invited Mason and Chloe into their games without fear. One night, I peeked into the living room to see all four of them sprawled together arguing over a board game, their voices loud but not cruel. The sight made my chest ache with a hope I had nearly buried. Still, the scars remained. I carried the memory of those words. "You're not my mom. You don't make the rules," like bruises under my skin. I knew healing would take time. Trust once broken doesn't grow back overnight. But the small gestures, the tentative steps were proof that maybe, just maybe, I hadn't been fighting in vain. That night, as I tucked Emma into bed, she looked at me with sleepy eyes and whispered, "I think Mason's changing." I smiled, brushing her hair back. "I think so too," I said. Then she added, "But even if he doesn't, you'll always be my mom. The real one." Tears blurred my vision. For all the pain, for all the battles, those words were my anchor. Because no matter what the stepchildren chose, I still had two little souls who saw me, who loved me without conditions. And maybe, just maybe, the others were beginning to see me too. The final turning point came one evening when a storm rolled through, the kind that rattles the windows and makes the whole house feel smaller. The power flickered out, and for a moment we were plunged into darkness. Emma whimpered. Tyler clutched my arm, and even Mason and Chloe froze in the silence. I lit candles, their glow softening the room, and we all gathered in the living room because no one wanted to be alone. It was in that fragile light that Chloe finally spoke the words I'd been waiting years to hear. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry for everything I said. You've been here for us more than anyone. I just didn't want to admit it." The flicker of the candle caught her tears, and before I could stop myself, I pulled her close. She didn't pull away. For the first time, she let herself be held. Mason sat stiffly across from us, his jaw tight, his pride warring with his guilt. But when Tyler shyly handed him a piece of candy, Mason accepted it without a word, his eyes darting toward me. for a moment too long to be accidental. He didn't say sorry, not yet, but sometimes silence holds its own apology. The storm passed, the lights blinked back on, but something inside me told me that night had changed the current of our family. It wasn't perfection, it wasn't fairy tale harmony, but it was a crack in the wall they had built between us. A crack wide enough for love to finally seep through. Weeks later, I noticed little things I never thought I'd see. Mason offering to drive Emma to practice, Chloe laughing with Tyler as they decorated cupcakes. They still had their moods, their sharp edges, but the venom in their words was gone. And though they hadn't called me mom, their actions whispered something closer, acknowledgement, maybe even respect. One Sunday afternoon, Mark and I sat on the porch while the kids played in the yard. His hand covered mine warm and steady. "I know this hasn't been easy," he said. "I should have defended you sooner. But I see now you've done more for them than anyone else ever has." His eyes softened. "And they're finally starting to see it too." I didn't answer right away. I just watched the children, my children, all of them laughing under the sun. For the first time in years, I let myself breathe. I know there will be more storms. I know Mason may falter. Chloe may retreat, that we will argue and stumble and fail each other again. But I also know I will no longer beg for their love or question my worth when they withhold it. I am enough because I choose to be. Because I refuse to be invisible in my own home. And maybe that's the lesson I needed to learn all along. You cannot force others to value you, but you can choose to stop discounting yourself. Respect starts with the boundaries you set, and sometimes those boundaries are the very thing that teaches others how to love you right. So if you've walked this road too, if you've been dismissed, overlooked, or told you were nothing, let my story remind you. You don't have to keep proving yourself to people who refuse to see your worth. Step into your own power, protect your peace, and trust that in time, the ones who truly matter will meet you where you stand. If this story touched your heart, I ask you please like, share, and subscribe. Leave me a comment below and tell me if you've ever faced a moment where you had to stand tall and claim your worth. Because sometimes the bravest thing we can do is refuse to disappear.